Kia ora koutou, and welcome to this webinar presentation on Lower North Island hybrid trains. Real pleasure to have you here. My name's Daran Ponter and I'm the Chair of Greater Wellington Regional Council.
And I'm Rachel Keedwell, I'm Chair of Horizons, and it's great to be here to talk trains. This project's been a long time coming and there's been a lot of work gone into it, and it's really great to be able to update all of you about where we've got to. So we're going to give you a short presentation and cover off quite a bit of the detail, and then there'll also be a chance for you to ask some questions that you can put in the chat. We have a bunch of questions that have already come through Facebook in the last day or so, but we'll do our best to get through everything, but feel free to chuck things in the chat as we go along, and at the end we'll come to those and work our way through those questions.
Look, before I start the presentation, just want to acknowledge our sponsors, if you like. Certainly had KiwiRail and NZTA along with us on this journey. But one of the critical elements of this exercise is the partnership that we have between Greater Wellington and Horizons. We've effectively broken down the barriers between our regions to develop the business case for this and put a solid proposition for the Lower North Island that starts to ignore the boundaries between our regions, because you ignore those boundaries every day of the week. Let us start by kicking into the presentation. This is a proposal for new hybrid trains. So what I'm going to start with is what we've currently got, which many of you are more than familiar with. So two regional train services through the Wairarapa to Masterton, and through the Kapiti Coast, Horowhenua, Manawatu to Palmerston North. Timetables that are far less frequent than we would all like, constrained by single track line, and clearly older rolling stock that is coming to the end of its life within the next 5 years. A service certainly to Palmerston North that is provided by KiwiRail at the moment, and that will change in due course when it comes into Metlink operation. In the Wairarapa area, most of you know that's 3 AM and PM peak services and 2 off-peak services.
Yes, and you'll know the current, what we're calling here the Manawatu line, is called the Capital Connection at the moment, run by KiwiRail. And that, those of you who use it know that there's not much flexibility. You've got one trip a day basically down to Wellington and back, and we're looking to vastly change that so it becomes a lot more flexible for you and how you want to use your forms of travel to get around the Lower North Island.
So the government in Budget 2023 confirmed funding for a set of new hybrid trains. These are four-car set trains at this stage, nominally 18 of those trains, so 18 times 4 cars in a hybrid format. And what I'll come on a little bit later to what hybrid means, but basically it means they'll run on the electric lines in the metropolitan area, and as they go to Palmerston North or Masterton, they will then run on battery technology once they leave the metro area.
And I think, Daran, just one thing to note here, the benefit of us working together is that those 18 trains as such, that there's not going to be one designated for the Manawatu line and one or a certain number for the Wairarapa line. It gives a whole lot more flexibility to keep things rolling all of the time, so that we just, we've got 18 to work across the entire network.
So in addition to the trains, it's a bit of a bigger package than just steel wheels. There are a series of track improvements also required, and they will be put in under the package, particularly allowing for passing loops on the Manawatu line. So it's going to be a higher frequency of trains. They've got to mix with freight traffic, and so you need more passing loops as a consequence. There will be further station upgrades. There have already been some recently on the Manawatu section of the Manawatu line. Those will continue on, or those further improvements will be put place in the Wairarapa, and more improvements on the Manawatu line, including things like real-time information, snapper cards, or the replacement system for snapper cards and the normal facilities that you might find on the current Metlink stations.
So some of those upgrades are underway at the moment or just completed, but there will be more. Is that right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Stabling facilities. New trains, new places to sleep. Those will be at various locations around the network. In the further reaches of the network. In addition to that, there will be a maintenance facility. The decision's already effectively been made around where that will be located, and that will be in Masterton. So all trains from this fleet, the 18 car sets, they will be maintained and serviced in Masterton. And then in addition, a final part of the package is a simulator to assist with driver training. What we're envisaging that you will get as whether you're commuters or whether you're off-peak users is a far superior service, so more reliable, more efficient and more attractive services, which is a win-win for communities and for the environment. We were very conscious right at the beginning of the business planning phase to look at innovative technology, hence the hybrid option. Diesel trains very quickly got counted out of the mix and through the cost benefit work that we did. For the Manawatu line,
Right, this is really exciting because rather than just one service a day going from Palmerston North to Wellington return, there are going to be 4 peak services. So that's 4 return services during the peak times and also 2 return services during the off-peak in the week during the weekdays and also on the weekend. I mean, that just opens up a whole lot of opportunities to have that rail connection on the weekends.
And so in the Wairarapa, currently there are 3 services in the AM peak. There are 4 services in the interpeak and another 3 services in the peak. That increases to 6 services in the mornings, 6 in the interpeak and 6 services in the evening. So an ability for us to almost provide a consistent service throughout the day, perhaps slightly earlier in the mornings and certainly a little bit later into the evenings. So when we say a service in this instance, it doesn't necessarily mean that service will be provided by a 4-car set. It could be provided by 2 4-car sets, so an 8-car train.
And I think it's also worth noting one of the benefits with these new trains is that their acceleration and deceleration is a whole lot quicker. So that will take a chunk of time off it. So for the current, what we call a capital connection at the moment, that will be down to around about 2 hours. At the moment it's 2 hours 5, 2 hours 10 for that service. So that makes it that little bit quicker for you to get there.
Look, in addition, one of the questions that you'll inevitably have about this exercise is, well, what are the trains going to look like? What sort of services will they have? And what we can say at this stage is that they will have improved wheelchair accessibility. They will have bathrooms. There is a requirement to have toilets. They'll be air conditioned like the Matangi set are in the Wellington network now. They will have bike storage. And then we come to the bit of the conundrum around food.
Yeah, so those of you who use the Capital Connection and love the cafe car, I know on Friday evenings a lot of you go and have your wine on the way home. We won't be having a cafe car in these new trains. We will be having a vending machine. Part of the decision making around that is that it's not commercially viable to keep the cafe car running, but also it takes up quite a bit of space. And if we're looking at trying to fit in more bikes or more seats or more accessibility, the cafe car to us is quite a clear thing that gives us that flexibility. But just one more point on that one, Daran, was I know for the Wairarapa line, it's really just enhancing what's already a quite extensive service. The change for the Manawatu line means that it gives a whole lot more flexibility as to how people can use things. It's not so much just opening up the commuting market from Palmerston North to Wellington. There are options to go the other direction, depending on the timing you're trying to work with. And just as an example, I've been working with Horowhenua District Council in Levin and trying to look at their transport solutions that they need. And a key part of their puzzle is the extension of this service and what that will mean, linking them both to the Wellington but also back to Palmerston North and the options that will open up for their community.
Question of why hybrid trains or why new trains full stop. The primary driver for this is an ageing fleet in both the Wairarapa line and the Manawatu line. These are all carriages that are effectively from the early 1970s out of the UK. They have these trains have had midlife upgrades, and we just can't suck much more life out of them. Cosmetically, they look fine on the outside, but it's what's happening underneath them that is perhaps more concern in the medium future. So we have an understanding that these trains will reach an end of the life in the sort of 2028-29 period, which is when these new trains that we're looking to bring on will come on stream. The other issue that we are, well, two issues really that we are having to consider as increasing population, but also the desire of both councils for increased mode shift, getting people out of cars into active modes and into public transport. That is already driving patronage increases. We've largely, certainly in the Wellington region, largely now recovered from COVID. We're at about 100% of where we were pre-COVID, and we're now going to see reasonably significant growth going forward, and that is going to result in sardines on trains unless we get more capacity on the line. So I've mentioned the mode shift. We were very keen on decarbonisation, as I've already indicated, which has driven us towards hybrid trains. But more importantly, we came to recognise, and it was perhaps a little bit of a moment, certainly for the Greater Wellington Regional Council to come to, that we could continue talking about line electrification. But there was a bigger national story going on here, and that was always going to result in this region coming second to the Golden Triangle in the upper North Island. So electrification was always going to be done in that area ahead of the lower North Island. So we could continue talking about electrifying the line north of Otaki or to Otaki and north to Palmerston North as much as we liked, but we could be having that conversation still in 30 or 40 years' time. We've opted to get out of that and go for hybrid, which gives us the best of both worlds.
Yes, and I think the question often is raised with me as well about why did we not choose to electrify the lines, and that the cost of electrifying the lines was greater than the cost of buying the trains. So you could electrify the lines and you still don't have a rolling stock that's going to suit the purpose. If we were going to invest more in the lines, it wouldn't be electrifying, it would be double tracking the entire way. Yep. That would give so many more options.
And look, and finally, the issue that's enabled us to bear down on hybrid technology is that it is a technology that's coming of age. We now see hybrid fleets in regular operation in Europe in particular, and there are numerous manufacturers who are now able to offer this type of technology, which we didn't see 5 or 10 years ago.
And I think it's worth just covering off what hybrid means in this sense, in that when it's on the electric part of the network, it uses the overhead wires, and then it has batteries for the section that's outside of the electrified network. And it might be that they're going to be tri-mode. It depends on where the battery technology gets to by the time the trains are manufactured. And so they may need an onboard generator that charges the battery for that extra bit, particularly from Waikanae to Palmerston North. It's quite a lengthy bit of track to get through with no overhead wires.
Look, I won't dwell on this slide, but we haven't got to this point without a significant amount of work, a little bit of pushing and shoving with government around first an indicative business case and then a detailed business case. So you don't get the sort of money that is the thick end of $1 billion for the whole package here without having done really significant due diligence to convince the government of the efficacy of a project like this. Very quickly, some of the benefits are providing a critical community link. So many communities, particularly on the Manawatu line, for whom a one-day a service just wasn't a service. It just doesn't provide, it provides for a few commuters, but it doesn't really provide for those community connections, those people who might be looking to go to Palmerston North or to Wellington for hospital or to the airport or what have you. Improved overall transport corridor resilience and capacity, and that is more than just the train experience. It's also about the benefits that go to road users in terms of this proposal. Improving public transport attractiveness, providing modern, efficient trains. And I think the thing that we learnt from the introduction of the Mātangi trains now 13 years ago in the Wellington region was the very action of just putting on modern trains where the heaters worked, where the doors closed properly, where there were good public announcement systems, air conditioning, etc., led to a significant spike in uptake.
And actually, I can just with the upgrade of the current capital connection having changed from the older rolling stock to refurbished rolling stock, still from the 1970s, but a lot more updated. I talked to someone who recently travelled on that and said it was like changing from being in a third world country train to a modern train, which gives you some indication of the level of comfort. And these new trains will be, you know, another notch above that again.
Right. End with this slide just to give you a sense about where we are at in the process. Earlier on, I'd indicated that we had secured money from the government through budget 2023. Just to say as an aside that we have an understanding, certainly from the National Party, that they are committed to this train purchase. So the election should have no consequence on whether this initiative goes forward or not. We're now moving into a phase where we will, in a few months' time, have expressions of interest and requests for proposals as part of the tender process. That will lead to a contract with a train provider in the late 2024, early 2025 period, then have a rather long gestation period of construction of the trains, with the first train looking to be shipped to Wellington in 2028, which is then followed by a reasonable commissioning period. So we're looking to see the full complement of trains on the network within 2029. That will sound like a long time away for people and for those really itching to use this and to get the connectivity. It is still quite a long way away, but investing in this type of infrastructure, in our experience from the past, it just does take a long time, and there's not a lot that we can do to make it go any faster, especially given the technology that we're looking to get onto our tracks.
Yeah, it's not like going to a supermarket and picking it off the shelf. These have to be custom made to the specifications for this project. Right, so time for questions. Please use the chat and flick them through, and we'll get them through onto our screens. But what we might do is start with some of the questions that have come through from social media in the last day or two. I'll let you take the first one there, Daran.
Yeah, so there have been a number of questions already. Some of them relate to the specification of the trains, and one of the ones that comes up quite a bit is whether the trains will have Wi-Fi, whether they'll be Wi-Fi enabled, and also whether they will provide for cycles. Look, in both instances, that will be investigated as part. The cycles will certainly be able to be carried on these trains. Just how many is a question. The Wi-Fi, yes, we're quite optimistic about that. We're just not able to give a total commitment at this stage.
People have asked about the train not stopping, particularly on the Manawatu line and all of the little townships that are through there. We're still going to only stop at the same, so from Waikanae it will be Otaki, Levin, Shannon and Palmerston North. So that's what the current capital connection does. To stop at every stop along the way would make it for a much longer service. It loses some of its efficiency, so that's how why we're doing that. But what we will be doing, both councils, is looking at how we can link our bus networks at either end of those stops to get people to the train more efficiently. I know in Palmerston North that's a big question that people have at the moment. There's no link between the train station and the buses. Once we have this upgraded service, that will definitely be part of it, is linking to the bus network so that people can easily get to the trains.
So that means that if you live in a place like Horohoro, for example, you will continue to need to transition or hub at Waikanae or at Otaki. It's just not feasible for us to put in a lot of intermediary stops. Certainly not in this proposition that we've got. A question that has just come through online is, when will the new services on the Manawatu line kick in, Rachel?
Yeah, so 2028 would be ideal, but that's the time when the first trains come out. So it will be at some point between there and 2029. Those dates are still to be firmed up, just like the timetable, exactly what those 6 return services a day look like. All of that detail is still to come, still to fit in those timelines for the production as well. But you know, you can rest assured that by 2029 you should have the full service up and running.
And so just a question on the interpeak services on the Wairarapa line. That is 6, I think, 6 interpeak services. But what I have to say at this stage is that this is still up for a little bit of debate. There's still a little bit of discussion happening with KiwiRail about the purchase number. And Rachel and I are both championing for the number of trains to our train order to move from 18 trains to 22 trains as a minimum. So it's a watch this space issue, and just in terms of how many interpeak services and peak services there actually will be.
Questions about the configuration of the trains themselves. At the moment, they have, I'm not entirely familiar with the Wairarapa line, but on the Manawatu line, of course, there are single seats facing in one direction or the other, and they're also opposite tables. So the new trains will be more like an airline, where you have the seats all facing the same direction and the pull-down trays and plugs so that you plug your devices in.
So questions come through. What's the deal with killing the cafe when services like the Te Huia manage to have plenty of seating space, etc., alongside a cafe car? Look, I think the thing there is that these are 4-car sets, and if you're looking for a cafe car, you've already killed off 25% of the capacity of your train. Cafes have been iconic in the New Zealand train system over many decades. But their time has probably long passed, and we think we can provide most of the services that people would be looking for with vending machines, rather than have a whole kitchen car and additional seating, etc. to do that. Every time we put a cafe car in, that may be less space for mobility impaired, for bikes, for luggage, etc., etc. So we're having to make some trade-offs here, and that's one of them.
But I hear your disappointment. I mean, I know that's a highlight, particularly for people at the end of the long week. It's a very social thing on the Capital Connection at the moment. So we'll have to set up a new culture.
So questions come through about whether this is all definite or whether the NATS or Act will kill this off. As I think I indicated a little bit earlier on, certainly have an undertaking within National Party policy that they stand behind this train purchase, and I've spoken to senior national MPs recently, and they have underlined their support for this initiative. The reality here, and most political parties will recognise that this is, if we don't make this investment, everybody's on buses. And that is an entirely different proposition for Manawatu and for the Wairarapa than they're used to.
Yeah, I don't think people in the Wairarapa would be too happy with that option. Be a brave politician to pull the plug on it. A question about that's come in earlier was about more frequent services being implemented before the 2028 date, and that is something we are looking at, whether there are options with the Manawatu line, with the existing capital connection, to potentially run a weekend service, or just looking at those things. So there's no promises there, but while we've got the trains, if we can work on that one and come up with some options, we're certainly looking at it.
So, latest questions come through is, will new rolling stock be compatible with 25 kV electrification, i.e. Auckland, likely to be used potentially in the future for North Island, Waikanae, upper beyond Waikanae? Look, the answer is no, straight away. This is the 1600 DC system that these trains are going to be built for in the Wellington region, and then battery from that point. That means that because they are battery, they would be able to run under any other gantry provided electrification system without actually taking the current from that system. But what we are speccing is a rail car that will be designed to be a national standard. So that means that if Auckland or the Waikato wanted to come in on this order of trains, or move in the future to commission their own tender process, they would have a car standard that they could take to that manufacturer and kit out as they saw fit. So in Auckland, that would mean different platform heights to be provided for by the trains that they need, and different electrical equipment. If we get a 25 kV system in the Wellington region in the future, then that's something that we will have to stare down as a separate project, because all of our Mātangi fleet and this fleet of trains will then have to be respec'd to be able to cater for that.
A question about cost. Someone asked, will it still be the same cost? No, it costs more to put on a better service. And the way the costs are apportioned, so of course Greater Wellington will have some, Horizons will have some, and then Waka Kotahi as well has a contribution to the operational costs. I can speak for the Horizons side, so it will depend on where you live. So it's a targeted rate that goes back to the districts that benefit from the service. So that would be in our region, that's the Manawatu, the Horowhenua and the Palmerston North areas, and it would equate to around about $19 to $21 of extra rates per ratepayer, depending on which of those districts that you live in. So it is a bump up in price, but it's an incredible bump up in service as well.
Is there any scope to extend the Manawatu line further north of Pāmihi, i.e. Fielding, Martin and Wanganui?
Yeah, so that's been asked of us quite a bit, and that's certainly not in the scope of this particular project, but the way things are being set up, there's, if we've got the political will in the future, there's every chance that we can extend it. We're also actively looking at trying to fill that gap between Palmerston North and Hamilton, so that you essentially have a service that runs the entire main trunk line. So that's another option that we're exploring. So again, all of those things, they're not necessarily happening in this package of works, but they are ideas that are on the table.
And equally, can we just run on a big loop through Woodville, so up the Waitanapa line and back down the Manawatu line?
That'd be beautiful, wouldn't it? Imagine that scenic trip. Yeah, absolutely, and links through to the Hawke's Bay. So again, it's the thinking's always been, the way transport is set up in New Zealand. It's funded. The public transport is within a region, so it doesn't really make sense, because the regions are based on where the rivers are and the catchments of those rivers. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are living near to the links that. Like if you live in Levin, you might look south to Wellington rather than north to Palmerston North as your main centre. So this proposal shows that we can work together and start breaking down those regional boundaries and start looking at how we could extend, through to the Taranaki, across to the Hawke's Bay.
A question that came in earlier in the week is, why aren't the bidirectional tracks used more effectively between Upper Hutt and Trentham? A simple reason for that is that while there are parallel tracks in that area, they're not signalled for that particular purpose at this stage. So that's just not technically a possibility until the signalling is redone through that area.
you got more live ones coming
I've got
in
the latest one is, do we have any photos of what the trains would look like? No, we don't. There are, if you go onto the web and type in hybrid trains, you'll come up with any number of live examples of hybrid trains, and any number of those operators could be the sorts of companies that tender into this process.
So where do you see these hybrid trains at the moment? Where are they currently running?
France, Spain, Germany, Switzerland in particular. There have been a few tests in the UK, but nothing as comprehensive as continental Europe at this stage. Europe, I think, is by and large leading the charge on this, and generally these trains in those situations are used on smaller or shorter branch type services that have never been electrified in the future, where they've used diesel trains. So this is not the Grand Vitesse, the TGV sort of situation that you've got in France. These are the smaller branches that feed into
Right.
that. Has it been considered to run shuttle services from Masterton to Upper Hutt prior to the new trains to increase services, as the WRL works are due to be completed in 25-26? Look, we've looked at that. We've looked at that several times, and we do look every now and then at supplementing trains with buses. By and large, what we know is that train users are not enamoured with that idea of having to be dragged over the rimatakas to Upper Hutt. So as much as possible, we are looking to continue to bed in the existing train services that we have through the Wairarapa, in order that we don't have to deploy buses. But if needs must, we may end up having to look at that.
All right, and I see a question there about the branding on the Manawatu line. Will that be Metlink? So, of course, at the moment, Metlink is for within the Greater Wellington region, and the Manawatu line runs under the brand of Capital Connection, which is actually a Kiwi Rail train. So this proposal will bring all of those together, and it will be council run, so it will no longer be called the Capital Connection, although we might have to have an argument about that one. That's a very fond name that those in Palmy have for the service. But exactly what that council-owned structure looks like for the Manawatu line, we're still working through the detail of that one. But it will be a continuous ticketing system. So by the time this new service is in, we should have the nationwide ticketing in place. So you'll be able to use the same system. So if you get on in Wellington, get off in Palmerston North, get onto a Palmerston North bus, it'll all be seamless for you.
Yeah, no idea what colour the Manawatu line will be when it's added to the Metlink route map, but that might be something that we'll leave to Horizons to. It might be the one choice option that they've got, is to choose the colour of the line on the maps. What will happen to the current Wairarapa line carriages? Well, as inevitably happens when trains come to end of life, a number of rail societies may put up their hands for those. Otherwise, they're likely to be put up for auction or sent to scrap. It's the hard-nosed end of life of those sorts of those assets. Certainly Metlink and the Greater Wellington Regional Council are not a rail preservation society. We're here to run commuter trains day in, day out. So we would not be looking to retain them, but we are happy for them to go to a good home.
Yeah, and I think something to be aware of is with these 1970s units, although we can make them look nice, like the current Capital Connection, the latest refurbishment there, it still doesn't meet necessarily all of the safety standards that it could do, and it can only get certification for, I think it's a 5-year period. So hence the tight timeframes that we're working to here. If that train doesn't get the certification to keep operating, that's where things come to a screeching halt. Even though it looks like a nice train and it is safe, these new ones, the specs are just so much higher and so much better.
The question again has been raised again about the national ticketing system and whether that will be one of the payment options. So as Rachel's already said, yes, absolutely. By the time the trains arrive, the national ticketing system will be in place, certainly for the Wellington region and the Horizons region, and you will use it on your bus, off your bus, and then onto the train and off the train. And in all cases, that will treat your journey as a seamless journey. You won't be penalised for fare transfers within those zones. The other question that's been raised is, well, what will the fares look like? That's an issue that we haven't got to at this point. We're still quite a number of years away from when these trains arrive. But what I think I can say is that we would be looking to get alignment in the fares structure. So if you're travelling from Masterton, or if you're travelling from Palmerston North, it's an equitable fare that treats you all pretty much the same.
Yeah, because at the moment it's pretty steep if you don't qualify for any of the half-price fares on the Capital Connection from Palmerston North to Wellington. I think it's $32 or somewhere of that nature, which is quite a lot more than if you were travelling from Masterton to Wellington. So we'd be looking at trying to even those up proportionally.
So a question about whether these trains will be operated under Transdev or somebody else. So that really is a question about the tender for the operation of the trains. These trains will come after the current contract has expired, and so the operator of these new trains will be the company that wins the new tender. It could be Transdev, but it could be somebody else just as equally. Not sure if there's anything else on that. So a question about the drivers and whether they'll be able to operate both trains. No, most likely that drivers will need some separate training to be able to run these hybrid trains, not just to run the trains, but they'll also require a different route familiarisation, especially on the Manawatu line, because Metlink will now be going into virgin territory, otherwise known as the Manawatu-Wanganui region.
And we're looking forward to working with you guys, because we couldn't have done this by ourselves. So, Greater Wellington knows all about trains, and this is the joy of bringing two regional councils together to get a much better product for everyone, for our communities.
So a question about whether these will be electrically compatible to the Matangi units, and therefore could they be run together in the event of a failure. That's technical side of things that we haven't got to at this stage, but I anticipate that it's unlikely that we would run those two trains in mixed operation. They're specified to do different jobs. These new hybrid trains are not just hybrid, but they've got toilets on board and they're running longer distances. So they're really inter-regional trains rather than metropolitan trains. Will the night train to Auckland come back? Well, that's a bigger question than the order of trains that we are putting through. But look, again, because we're trying to specify a national standard for future train purchases, we potentially here have the base for a night train in the future. The only difference is, rather than seats, we'd be putting in sleeper compartments, etc., into them. So anything's possible, but it's not in our remit at the moment for either Rachel or I.
No, and this feels like a big enough project to get over the line by itself.
Are there any plans to introduce European train control systems in the metro areas, such as in Auckland? And if so, will these trains be ETCS compatible? Yes, there are plans to do that. They are certainly on the drawing board, and they are being costed, but they're not for immediate introduction. But we know that if we want to get greater frequency on our network, i.e. close the gaps between trains, we can't do that without an European train control system. Would the new trains use diesel or battery power after Upper Hutt and Waikanae?
So the idea is battery power as much as possible. Again, because battery technology is changing so quickly, by the time that we receive these trains, the batteries may have enough to get to potentially to Masterton. It's a bit further to get to Palmerston North. And so that's why the diesel generator would be there on board as a backup to recharge the batteries. But that would be the backup only.
A question about the frost conditions on the lines, the issue being the problems that the Mātangis experience when we have heavy frost and ice forms on the catenary lines, and whether that will be an issue that we are able to resolve with the new hybrid trains. Certainly something we'll put into the mix. We don't like to have our trains delayed because of ice, but probably a technical issue that's a little bit further down the track, so to speak. What is the vision for New Zealand's rail network? Can we expect regular services to the regions like the UK? That's probably a bigger question than Rachel and I can answer. We're very focused on the lower North Island. It's been a significant effort on the part of our two organisations and the very competent staff that we have here to build up a business case, an indicative business case first, and then a detailed business case to sell the proposition to the government, not just for new trains, but this big step change in technology to hybrid trains. We'd like to think that in time other regions and the government will actually make similar ventures in this regard, but we are very firm on bedding in rail and electrification in the lower North Island as our mandate.
Yeah, and I agree, regional rail is very much a poor cousin when you look at even just our neighbour in Australia. I had an Australian visitor who had just moved to Wellington and was going to come up and see me in Palmerston North and said she'd just jump on the train, and I was like, well, that's not going to happen because it was the weekend. And she is used to living somewhere similar distance from Melbourne as Palmerston North is from Wellington, and had hourly trains. So, you know, there's a lot we can aspire to here, but this is, as Daran said, this is the first step, just getting this project bedded in.
So, look, one question that's very topical for the moment, given certainly where we've been in the Wellington region with our shortage of bus drivers, is how are you going to find the staff, given that there are staff shortages on many of the trains as it is. We've got the thick end of 6 years to stare down that problem, not dismissing the fact that it is a problem. The labour market is very constrained at the moment. One of the things that will help in this regard in terms of pushing train drivers through the system is the simulator that I referred to earlier. So we're not having to take as many trains out of action to do that. We can have people constantly in the pipeline with training. But it is on both our councils to ensure that we are offering an attractive package, not just to the train drivers, but to the other train and rail staff involved in the Metlink operation. Wairarapa line currently has large logging trains running to Wellington. Will these diesel hauled or employ hybrid locos in the future? That's a question to KiwiRail. We would like to think that all freight trains coming through the Manawatu or through the Wairarapa in time will be hybrid trains, that we're burning as less diesel as we need to, but that's really within the lap of KiwiRail and the government.
And we'll be working closely with KiwiRail through this process because, of course, to make it work, particularly on the Manawatu line with this increased service level, we're juggling with the freight that's already there. So that's where the extra passing loops gives some of the ability there, but we're going to have to work so that their timetable fits ours to make sure things flow really smoothly.
One question, Rachel, I think it probably relates to the Manawatu line, is can more frequent services be implemented before the 2028 replacement trains?
Yeah, so that one we touched on before was it's something we're definitely exploring. I think on the weekend and public holidays, it would be a really great place to start that trial and see what sort of uptake there is. I understand from the Te Huia service that weekends are particularly popular there, so that could be a really good place for us to, again, work together to see what we need to do to put that in place.
Questions arisen about what types of batteries will be used on the hybrid trains. It's more than likely that the tender will open that question up to the tendering companies to come forward with the best kit, if you like. It's more than likely, given the evolution of battery technology, that everything might be designed and the batteries are the last thing that you actually put into the train, so that we can maximise the benefit from that technology over the next 5 or 6 years. Currently, what we're aware of is that train manufacturers can deliver trains that are running approximately 80 to 90 kilometres on battery power within 5 or 6 years time. There could be a significant extension to that, which may negate the need for any diesel component to these trains at all.
That's right, and I think that next question we've got there around whether the battery covers like all the way to Masterton and then back again. So again, that's going to be dependent on that battery range, but my understanding there'll be an ability to recharge at the end of the line if needed to.
Yeah, so much like the way in which Transit in New Zealand, or Transurban in Wellington charge their buses in Island Bay and at the Lambton interchange, at Masterton and Palmerston North, there will likely be an ability to actually charge the trains in those areas so that they can make that return journey.
Right, have we got more coming through?
I think last set of questions, if you've got any further questions, folks. So you can put these questions into the chat on the Teams page if you're not already aware.
There is a question that did come through earlier, someone asking if catching the train to work versus driving in, and working out the costs of those, and if it's, and they're saying that it was cheaper to carpool or to drive, and what's the point? You know, how can public transport be so expensive? And you know, that's a really good one, and it's one that I think with the recent dropping of the half price fares, it makes you realise how public transport can be competitive. I think also that we forget how much car use is actually subsidised in everyday life, and it's a subsidy that we all just take for granted, yet we expect you know, public transport and trains to pay their own ways. So there's, you know, quite a lot of factors at play there, and it is a bit of a decision as to which ones we want to prioritise. And if we want to get people into public transport, then dropping those fares, it's shown it really does help increase the patronage.
So a question that we've got come in is about the room or the possibility for automation of trains. No, these trains are unlikely to be automated. Full stop. I suppose we're not entertaining that possibility. There's also a question here in the chat about congestion at the Wellington station, which really is a reference to the Wellington Throat, the area where a number of lines sort of come in just before the Wellington station platforms. There's $70 million set aside by Kiwi Rail to address the Wellington Throat, effectively to lay out a new structure for the line, signalling, points work, etc. In that area that's due to commence in the next few years.
Right. Is that us, do you think?
I think it might be.
Be about there. If you've got more questions and they're coming through the chat and we haven't answered them, we have got a frequently asked questions compilation that we're pulling together, and that will be on our website. So all of the ones today, if you didn't catch the answers to all of them, we will be putting that up on our websites. So there is a, the Metlink has got metlink.org.nz /future rail. So that's the website that's going to be putting all of the information about this project, and we'll keep that updated. And if you're in the Horizons region, we'll get a link to that on our Horizons website as well, so that you can come across and have a look. So there will be, we'll keep all these questions up to date because we receive new ones all the time. And as more information comes to hand as well, there'll be updates to provide.
Excellent. Ka kite, everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Haere rā.